Emma, 32, walked into the courtroom feeling every pair of eyes turned toward her. The air felt heavy with judgment before anyone spoke. Her mother, Linda, rolled her eyes the second Emma entered, not even pretending to hide it. It was the kind of eye roll that said, "Here we go again," as if Emma was a burden in her carefully polished story of being the victim. Then Judge Brennan looked up from the file, his pen pausing midair. His eyes shifted from the papers to Emma's face, and recognition hit him like a jolt. "Wait a minute," he said slowly, setting his pen down. "These allegations, they're against you." Emma stayed still, calm but burning inside. She could almost hear her mother's smug silence behind her. The entire courtroom felt frozen, waiting to see how the story would unfold. What no one there knew was that Emma's parents had no idea who she had really become, and that was the best part. To understand why she was standing there, she needed to go back 3 months. Her grandfather had died, Judge William Parker, a legend with 40 years on the Supreme Court bench. He was the man who had raised her while her parents lived their glamorous lives pretending she didn't exist. His funeral was grand. Every lawyer, judge, and politician came to pay respects. Emma gave the eulogy through tears, while Linda and her father, Robert, sat in the back row, late as usual and gone before the reception even began. She hadn't seen them in more than a decade. The last time was her 18th birthday when her grandmother passed away, and they appeared for 90 minutes, long enough to be seen, not to care. After Grandma Helen died, it was just Emma and her grandfather. He was 73 then, but still sharp, still full of purpose, still making sure she had every chance at a good life. He took her to courtrooms, taught her about fairness, and told her to always stand firm when the truth was on her side. Her parents had been young when she was born. Linda got pregnant at 18, too restless to handle motherhood. Robert was chasing a hockey career, too proud to admit he wasn't ready. Together they did what selfish people do, dropped their baby at her grandparents' doorstep and vanished. They called it temporary. It wasn't. 4 years, visits came rarely, sometimes twice a year if they felt generous. Linda would show up in designer clothes, kiss the air beside Emma's cheek, and spend the rest of the visit criticizing how her mother raised her. "She's too soft," Linda would say, sipping coffee she didn't pay for. "You're spoiling her." Grandma Helen would just smile, holding Emma close. "Love isn't spoiling, Linda," she'd reply gently. "It's parenting." Linda always rolled her eyes, muttering something about how she had a real career waiting. Robert never even bothered showing up. Grandpa used to switch on the television during hockey season so Emma could see her father skating across the ice. "He's out there somewhere," he'd say softly, though the pride never reached his eyes. Emma didn't grow up feeling poor or unloved. Her grandparents filled every empty space her parents left behind. They came to every school play, every soccer game, every science fair. When Grandma died suddenly from a stroke, Emma's world fell apart. She was 18, about to start college, and her greatest supporter was gone. Grandpa carried her through that storm. He made sure she didn't fall apart. In that silence of grief, he began teaching her what truly mattered: honor, responsibility, and the courage to do what was right. Years later, when Emma graduated law school top of her class, Grandpa was there beaming with pride. Her parents sent a card with no return address. "They probably saw it on the news," Grandpa joked, though his eyes carried sadness. He used his influence to get her a job at the prosecutor's office, but Emma earned every victory herself. She worked longer hours than anyone, taking on complex cases no one else wanted. By 30, she was one of the youngest senior prosecutors in the state. Her parents had no idea. Every Sunday night she had dinner with Grandpa. It was their sacred ritual. Sometimes grilled cheese, sometimes pizza, but always laughter, conversation, and warmth. "Never compromise your integrity," he'd remind her. "The law can be messy, but your conscience must stay clean." When he died peacefully at 87, Emma felt like the floor had vanished under her. Yet she stood tall at the will reading a week later, expecting maybe his books or watch. Instead, she inherited everything: the house, the investments, the savings. All of it. Inside a sealed letter, Grandpa had written, "My dearest Emma, you earned this, not by blood but by love. You showed up when others did not. You are my greatest joy. Be strong." Tears fell as she read. Then came another envelope. Documents proving he'd given Linda and Robert over $800,000 across 2 decades. Letters from them asking for more. Promises never kept. The attorney smiled sadly. "Your grandfather knew this day might come," he said. "He wanted you prepared." Emma folded the papers, heart steady. 30 days later, Emma's lawyer called. "They've filed a lawsuit," he said flatly. "Your parents are claiming you manipulated your grandfather and that he was incompetent when he signed the will." Emma laughed softly, disbelief mixed with fury. "They're suing me?" she asked. "After abandoning me my whole life." The irony was bitter. She was in court prosecuting a fraud case when the news came, and she couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity. Her parents had no idea who they were up against, and that was their biggest mistake. They thought she was still that quiet girl they once left behind. They didn't know she'd spent a decade taking down powerful criminals who thought they were untouchable. They didn't know every trick, every loophole, every manipulation they could try, she already knew by heart. And most of all, they didn't know that the presiding judge, Marcus Brennan, had once clerked for her grandfather. He knew the Parker family history well. The moment he recognized Emma in court, everything changed. Fate, it seemed, had decided to balance the scales. "Before we begin," Judge Brennan said evenly, "I must disclose I once worked for Judge Parker." He paused, giving both sides a chance to object. Emma's mother's lawyer whispered quickly with her clients. Linda's face tightened. Robert looked impatient. "No objection, Your Honor," the lawyer said. Brennan nodded once. "Then let's proceed." Emma sat silently, her hands steady in her lap. She wasn't here to win an inheritance. She was here to defend her grandfather's truth, the one thing that mattered most to her. And she was ready. The courtroom buzzed when the case began. Her mother's lawyer, Richard Palmer, opened with a performance worthy of an actor. "My clients," he said, his voice trembling with fake emotion, "were loving parents, wrongfully cut off by a manipulative granddaughter who turned their own father against them." Emma stayed calm, eyes fixed ahead. She had heard better lies in criminal trials. Palmer painted her as cold, ambitious, calculating. The kind of woman who'd trade affection for power. She didn't flinch. She was saving her truth for the stand. When it was her turn to testify, the air felt different. Tense, expectant. Emma swore the oath and faced her mother for the first time in years. Thomas, her attorney, began gently. "Tell the court about your childhood." Emma took a deep breath. "My mother was 18 when she had me. She and my father decided they weren't ready. They left me with my grandparents and barely looked back." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "How often did they visit?" Thomas asked. "Maybe twice a year," she said quietly. "If that." Her voice trembled, but not from weakness. "My grandparents raised me. They were my parents in every way that mattered." She told the court about birthdays missed, about Linda showing up late and leaving early, about Robert waiting in the car while she sang on stage. "They gave me everything," she said, tears threatening but never falling. "Not because they had to, because they wanted to." The courtroom fell silent. Even Judge Brennan leaned forward slightly, his face unreadable, but his eyes soft with something like respect. Palmer stood for cross-examination, confidence dripping from his voice. "Miss Parker, couldn't you have tried harder to reconnect with your parents?" he asked. Emma tilted her head slightly. "I was a child," she replied. "Children don't arrange visits. Parents do." He tried again, louder this time. "But as an adult." "As an adult," Emma said calmly, "I learned not to chase people who didn't want to be found." Murmurs filled the room. Palmer shifted, caught off guard by her composure. "So, you admit you resented them?" "No," she said. "I outgrew needing them." When Palmer accused her of manipulating her grandfather, Emma's tone never changed. "He was my family," she said simply. "He raised me. He made his own decisions." Palmer tried twisting her words. "You benefited financially from his will." "Yes," she said, "because I was there. I showed up, cared. That's more than my parents ever did." The gallery gasped softly. Palmer's jaw tightened, his theatrics slipping. "No further questions," he muttered finally. Emma stepped down, walking past her parents without a glance. She had already said everything that mattered. The next day, Judge Brennan called for closing arguments. Palmer began again with trembling hands. "Your Honor, blood is thicker than water," he declared. "This estate belongs to the daughter, not the granddaughter." He went on about grief, manipulation, vulnerability. When Thomas stood, he didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "This isn't about blood. It's about love." Judge Parker left his estate to the person who showed up, to the person who was there every day for 32 years. That's not manipulation. That's devotion. The courtroom waited, breathless, as Judge Brennan reviewed his notes. "The plaintiffs," he began, "failed to prove undue influence or incompetence. The will stands as written." The gavel struck once. The echo rang like thunder. Linda sobbed loudly. Robert cursed under his breath, but Emma felt only peace. Justice, not just for her but for the man who raised her. As the courtroom emptied, Linda reached for her. "Emma, please," she whispered. Emma stepped back, eyes calm. "My mother's name was Helen," she said quietly. "You're just Linda." Linda's face crumpled as Emma turned away. "Please," she whispered again, her voice shaking. "I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother." Emma paused, her heart pounding but her mind steady. "No," she said firmly. "You had years to be my mother. Every birthday, every holiday, every chance to show up. You chose not to." Her words landed like truth carved in stone. Linda covered her face and wept. Robert stood beside her, stone-faced, already pulling out his phone. Emma didn't wait for a reply. She walked straight out into the sunlight. Outside the courthouse, the wind felt cleaner, lighter. Thomas joined her on the steps. "You did it," he said softly. Emma nodded, but her eyes were distant. "It's not about winning," she murmured. "It's about proving Grandpa was right." Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Emma ignored them. For the first time, she wasn't defending a case. She was defending her life. She climbed into the car, leaned back, and exhaled. For 32 years, she'd carried her parents' absence like a shadow. That day, she finally let it go. That evening, she drove to the cemetery, a bouquet of fresh tulips in her hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft gold. "We won, Grandpa," she whispered, kneeling beside his grave. "They tried to take everything, but the truth held." She smiled through quiet tears. "You always said justice finds its way." The wind stirred gently through the trees, and for a fleeting second, Emma felt him there, steady, proud, watching her like he always did. She stayed until the last light faded, peace finally settling in. 6 months later, life found its rhythm again. Work, gym, late-night takeout, and the occasional dinner with friends. The inheritance stayed untouched, invested just as Grandpa would have wanted. She didn't need it. Her career gave her purpose. One quiet Saturday morning, her doorbell rang. Through the peephole stood a woman in her 60s. "Emma Parker?" the woman asked softly. "Yes. I'm Patricia. I lived next door to your grandfather for 30 years. I think you should have this." She handed Emma a thick, sealed envelope. Emma invited her in. Patricia hesitated before speaking. "I helped your grandfather organize his study after he passed. I found these letters in a drawer marked unsent." Emma's heart thudded. Inside the envelope were dozens of letters, all in Grandpa's familiar handwriting, all addressed to Linda. Patricia's eyes softened. "I read a few," she admitted quietly. "I had to know what they were before giving them to you." Emma unfolded the first letter, dated 20 years earlier. "Dear Linda," it began, I'm writing because I can't say this to your face. The letter continued. Emma had her dance recital today. She kept looking for you in the crowd. I watched her face fall when she realized you weren't there. How many more times must I see her heart break because you can't be bothered to show up? Emma's eyes blurred with tears. Each letter carried the same heartbreak. Disappointment, anger, and love tangled together. One was from 2 years before he died. I've given you over $600,000, Linda. I told myself it was help, but it's just enabling. He had written, I'm done sending extra money. You're my daughter, and I'll always love you, but I can't keep rescuing you. The greatest gift I ever gave you wasn't money. It was Emma. You left her, and she saved me. Emma set the letter down, wiping her eyes. Patricia reached over, squeezing her hand gently. He loved you, dear, she said softly. You were his heart. He never stopped hoping Linda would change, but he also knew you were his true legacy. Emma nodded slowly. Thank you for bringing these. After Patricia left, Emma sat for hours reading every letter. Some were angry, some forgiving, all filled with truth. They revealed the depth of Grandpa's love and the pain he carried for his daughter's choices. By the last page, Emma understood. Grandpa hadn't written to shame Linda. He'd written to let go. He accepted who she was, even if it broke his heart. Emma placed the letters in a wooden box beside Grandpa's old watch. You gave me everything, she whispered. Now I understand all of it. The following week, Emma met Judge Brennan at a legal conference. Emma, he greeted warmly, shaking her hand. I'm glad to see you. It's good to see you too, Judge, she replied. That trial was something. Brennan nodded. Your grandfather would have been proud. You handled yourself like a true Parker. Emma smiled faintly. He taught me everything. They talked about her work, her future, and the importance of integrity in the justice system. Keep your compass steady, Brennan said before leaving. That's how your grandfather lived and won. That night, Emma sat at her desk, thinking about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. She opened a fresh document on her computer and began typing her own will. It wasn't about money, it was about purpose. She left her estate to charities Grandpa had supported, education funds, legal aid, and shelters for children. Not a cent to her parents. They already took enough, she whispered. When she signed the document, she felt something shift inside. A quiet certainty that her grandfather's lessons would never fade. Months passed, and Emma's career soared. Her reputation as a sharp, ethical prosecutor spread through the state. She handled difficult cases others avoided, standing firm in every courtroom she entered. But outside of work, she kept the same tradition: Sunday dinners. Now they were with close friends instead of Grandpa, but the laughter and warmth remained. One evening she found herself saying, "He'd love this," out loud. Her friends smiled knowingly. Grandpa's presence still filled every corner of her life, not as a shadow, but as a guiding light. A year after the trial, Emma received a call that changed everything. "The governor's office wants to appoint you as a judge," Thomas said, barely containing his excitement. Emma froze. "Me? A judge?" "Yes," he laughed. "And the youngest one this state's ever had." That night she sat by her window, thinking about Grandpa's words. "You'll be a judge someday, Emma. You see truth clearly." She whispered into the quiet room. "You were right, Grandpa." Accepting the position wasn't just a promotion. It was destiny unfolding exactly as he foresaw. Her first day on the bench was surreal. The courtroom, once a battlefield, now felt like her kingdom. She wore Grandpa's old robe, freshly pressed and slightly oversized. The scent of the wood, the hush before proceedings, it all felt sacred. Her first case was a custody dispute. Two parents fighting bitterly over their 5-year-old daughter. Listening to them, Emma's chest tightened. She saw herself in that child, caught between pride and absence. "Children remember who shows up," she said in her ruling. "Be the love they can depend on." Word spread quickly about the new judge who didn't tolerate selfishness. Emma became known for her fairness and firmness. In her courtroom, love wasn't defined by blood but by presence. A few years later, she faced a familiar type of case. Adult children suing over their father's will, claiming a caregiver manipulated him. The facts mirrored her own story. Emma sighed deeply, knowing what she had to do. "I'm recusing myself," she told the clerk. "It's too personal." But before stepping away, she advised both lawyers. "Show who showed up." The case went to another judge, who ruled exactly as she would have. The caregiver won, the children lost. Actions had consequences. As the years went on, Emma became known as the judge of truth. She valued integrity over theatrics, compassion over ego. 5 years into her judgeship, she received a call from a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Emma," the voice said. It was Robert. "It's your mother. She's sick. Heart problems. She's asking for you." Emma closed her eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said quietly. "She doesn't have long," Robert said, his tone pleading. "She wants to make peace." Emma took a slow breath. "Peace isn't made after decades of silence, Robert. It's made when people show up." "She's still your mother," he snapped. "No," Emma replied firmly. "She's the woman who gave birth to me. My mother was Helen Parker. Tell Linda I wish her peace, but I won't be visiting." There was silence, then the line clicked. Emma set the phone down and stared out the window, her heart heavy but certain. When Linda died months later, Emma didn't attend the funeral. She sent no flowers, no message. Some colleagues whispered she was cold. Others understood. "She didn't raise me," Emma explained simply. "Her death doesn't change that." The years that followed were filled with meaning, not regret. Emma rose through the ranks until one day, the governor called again. "Congratulations, Justice Parker," he said proudly. At 38, she was appointed to the Supreme Court, taking the same seat her grandfather once held. The legacy had come full circle. Her first opinion on the bench made headlines. The case involved parents trying to reclaim rights to children they'd neglected for years. Emma's words echoed across the nation. Parenthood is not a title of privilege. It's a duty of presence. Love is proven by consistency, not by claim. Critics said she was too harsh. Others called her brave. But Emma didn't care about praise or criticism. She cared about truth. Every ruling, every line she wrote, carried a trace of Grandpa's wisdom, the belief that love is action, not blood. Years passed in quiet triumph. She grew older, wiser, and more at peace. When the Supreme Court building was renamed the William Parker Justice Center, Emma stood at the podium beneath her grandfather's portrait. "To the world, he was a great judge," she said softly. "To me, he was simply Grandpa, the man who saved me when no one else would." She told stories of his patience, his laughter, his guidance. As she finished, she whispered toward the portrait. "We did it. Everything you hoped for. Everything you believed I could be." That night, Emma returned home and opened the wooden box, the one holding Grandpa's watch, the unsent letters, and the note he'd left her. She unfolded the paper once more. "You earned this through love and presence." Her tears fell freely this time, not from pain but gratitude. Looking at their photo, Grandpa, Grandma, and her covered in birthday cake, she smiled. "You're still with me," she whispered. "In everything I do." Outside, the wind stirred the tulips by her window, blooming again after winter, just as love always does.